Today we're actually going to talk about something that I think we've briefly mentioned a few times. We haven't done a podcast episode on it, but it's something we actually teach a ton on in the work that we do. And it's about receiving feedback, how to deal with feedback and criticism. So receiving feedback is pretty critical to growth, especially as an authentic leader, but it tends to be something that makes us incredibly anxious. Why do you think that is?
I think human beings have not been taught properly how feedback can be, well, a lot of times you think about it depending on how you grew up, sometimes feedback was given to you many times in just not a healthy way. Like feedback was given because maybe a parent or a teacher or someone was just pissed off at you. So it was like, yelling or whatever, right? And they were just like, stop doing this, don't run out here, don't do that. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of times we receive feedback that way. And then on top of that, when you receive feedback, so no one likes that. So a lot of times we don't receive it great. The other thing is that when you do receive feedback, it's correction. So it always feels some type of way. And then you're really never help processing why I feel that way. So you just kind of go through life like just either, and you have a few different responses to it. So I think we just don't really do a great job of how to actually teach how to give feedback and tell people the purpose of feedback, but then also how we actually receive feedback and how we, kind of process when we're feeling some type of way. So I just think it's just kind of like, a lot of times the feedback we would get is when people were frustrated, angry, or something like that, not actually stuff that actually was like that they were trying to do it to actually help you.
Today we're actually talking about how we've had the opportunity to work with billionaires. And they can do the craziest things. They can sometimes say the craziest things and make really challenging, scary decisions. But once we ask them to confront somebody and be honest about feedback that they need to give someone, or when we put them in the position to have to receive feedback from their team, you would be shocked at the level of just anxiety that starts to happen.
Yeah, because I think that when you start having success, it becomes very easy to just have a bunch of people around you without you knowing that are just people who say yes to you or people who won't correct you. You actually, as a leader, you have to be active in creating that type of environment. Because if you don't, what you'll do is not even mean to. You'll just kind of just have people because just sometimes I think leaders fail to realize because they'll say, yeah, I'm an open book, man. Just, tell me. But what they don't realize, people have intimidation by your title or your position you have. And so you have to create an atmosphere to where that is actually able to happen and take place. And so you have to invite that in. And so I think a lot of times you just end up shielding yourself from that. And like we said earlier, a lot of times people, it doesn't matter how much money you make, you never learn how to give or receive feedback well. And so what happens, people just get terrified to actually give feedback because a lot of times we want people to really like us. We want people to always think the best of us. So when you have to deliver bad news to somebody, then we don't like that. Or if we have to help somebody, and normally when feedback is usually given, we give feedback. A lot of times probably how we receive feedback. And so it was it's usually done in a way where you're angry. And so when you get to your limit, then you'll just say whatever, you'll say directly what it is. And so I always say that's not great feedback either, because even though it's the truth, you didn't do it in a way to help someone. And so again, yeah, you have a lot of wealthy people who are successful, but man, they struggle to actually, they'll take big risks business wise and things like that. But they go have a conversation with somebody and correct them. That's really difficult for them.
And doing this for a little bit, you've realized that people typically respond one of three ways, and that is the alligator, the samurai, or the surgeon. Can you explain those three a little bit further?
Yeah, this kind of came to me. I don't even really remember when this happened. It was just, I was actually trying to explain. I take that back. I do remember when it was. I was trying to explain to someone how they respond, and on the spot, I was like, oh, this is how it is, right? And it just kind of came to me and it just kind of stuck. And so the idea of the alligator samurai and the patient. And so if you think about an alligator, right, we live here in Florida, so they're everywhere. The one thing about an alligator has lived for they've been around for, thousands, some people believe millions of years. And the thing about it, that's what allows them to survive. And, a lot of times alligators live long lives and whatever. It's because of the fact that they have their skin is incredibly resilient. So it's hard to pierce their skin and, stuff like that. And so because it's very tough on the outside. And so they actually have very resilient skin. They've been able to, but they don't really change and adapt a lot, but they're able to kind of survive. And I tell people a lot of times people are like alligators when it comes to criticism or feedback. What they will do is that they have tough skin. And so when that criticism comes, it's like hitting, it'll be like you trying to pierce an alligator. It doesn't go through at all. And so a lot of times that means people can end up walking in ignorance. They can walk in pride or whatever because they have built their way to not actually to take it in. That's their surviving mechanism. The other one is actually the samurai. And there's this thing called the Bushido Code, which is this very high like honor. It's like, they live by honor, courage, things like that. So because they live in that high honor culture, they don't want to live in dishonor. So if there ever is something where they don't live with courage or something like that, they have this thing called seppuku, which is actually like ritual suicide. So it's the whole thing of falling on your sword. And so the idea that they have so much shame for what they're doing or how they live that they're willing to just to die on their own sword. And I think a lot of times when correction happens for people, there's other people who are like the samurai, to where they're opposite of the alligator. It's just when it pierces them, it's just like they take criticism and they let it run them through. It's the person who you sit there and have a conversation with, and you try to, you're going in and you're like, okay, I'm going to correct them. And it's not that big of a deal. And you may say, hey, just can you make sure, when you put your fork in the sink to your roommate, put your fork in the sink or whatever, can you make sure that, you clean that or whatever? And then all of a sudden, like, they just literally start crying. It says, yes, you're right. My mom used to say that I'm the worst. I'm never going to get this right. And you're just like, whoa, it's not that deep, right? That's somebody who's like the samurai, where like you were just trying to give them a small correction and help around the house. They took it as like this was an indictment on their entire life, and they live in shame and dishonor, and they run themselves through. The third one is actually a patient. And so if you think about a patient in the surgery, a patient has to make a decision you have the freedom to if you want to have surgery or not. And then in having surgery, so that's a willful choice to then allow them to lay you on a table. And then what does a surgeon do? A surgeon goes in and cuts you, but he doesn't cut you to harm you. He cuts you and you willfully allow him to cut you, and he cuts deep enough in order to heal you and fix you. That is what correction and feedback should be. We should allow it to pierce us enough that it doesn't kill us like the samurai, or it doesn't pierce at all like the alligator, but actually it cuts deep enough in order to fix us and heal us. And so I think those are really the three ways people respond to kind of correction and feedback all the time.
How do you track the patterns?
I think what I try to do is that when someone is saying something like to me or whatever, and I look back in that moment, I kind of like, whenever there's been a moment of correction and things, even in the past, I would always try to look back and say, man, how did I respond? How did I feel? What did I say? And then what I would do is just kind of look at that, and then I would try to go underneath the hood of, okay, why did I respond that way? Because sometimes people say things to you, and they'll say it to you in the wrong kind of way, and it may you put the alligator up because then it pissed you off how they said it. They didn't say it in a way, and you could tell they weren't there trying to help you. They were actually trying to hurt you with it. But I always, I've said this before on this podcast, one of the greatest quotes I heard from Billy Graham was that, let your critics be your greatest coaches. Sometimes even when people say things the wrong way, it's okay to listen to them, to hear what they're saying, and then beyond, but then see wherever is there truth. Okay, make a correction and then move on. I think that so many times, I was reading this recently, and it's probably a podcast we'll do at some point, but I think that people when someone like criticizes you sometimes, why we struggle with it, and we either go to alligator or the samurai, is because we don't learn to have this distinction. We think they're attacking us. Most of the time, 9 out of 10 times when people, even if they say something cruel towards you, even if they whatever, it's not them personally, I think, attacking you. They're attacking your idea. They're attacking your stance because how your stance makes them feel, or their disagreement. They're not attacking you as a person. And I'll never forget, reading that, how that's really helped me, because I'm like, oh, they're not mad at me or don't like me. They don't like the idea, because especially when you lead and you're trying to get people to change, and then they start gossiping about you, or they say, they start to question your heart towards certain things, and you start to realize, like, man, what did I do? I thought I was this. And then, they're saying, they start questioning your character. And then when you really look at it, if you go and do the examination, if it's not something going on in your character, you start to realize, no, man, they're attacking the idea or the thing you're asking them to do, and they're not actually attacking you as a person.
Surgery, even when it's done at its best, is incredibly painful and comes with recovery. And that's also true with criticism. How, even in the pain, do we remind ourselves that it's worth it, and what makes criticism valuable?
I think it makes you valuable because I think it's always like growth. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no growth without pain. I was thinking about that. Like, I grew like an inch or two for like almost 5 or 6 years straight, and it was just super painful. You know what I mean? Like, my knees were always hurting, my body just hurt, because I was like growing. And so I tell people like growth has pain and correction has pain. Like, I mean, this is just reality. Nobody really wants to be, we want to live like a perfect life. We want to do everything the right way. But most times we don't do everything the right way. And so for somebody to tell you like, hey, you did that bad, or this wasn't great, or whatever, it's just really, really painful to actually to be able to kind of receive that.